Hey guys, Jalen here. So today I'll be looking at a video from Mrs. Eats on why you'll hate living in Japan. I assume when they say you'll, they mean foreigners. I'm a foreigner. I live in Japan. And let's see if these are things I agree with or things I don't agree with. Let's begin.
For some of you, moving to Japan would be a dream come true, right? But interestingly, I know so many people from overseas that moved to Japan and hated it.
I lived briefly in Japan a while ago. The year I spent in Japan was probably the most unhappy of my life.
So don't be surprised if it happens to you. Almost everyone who moves to Japan will hate Japan or Japanese culture sooner or later.
A year in Japan isn't really that long, actually. I've been in Japan 6 years. So just looking at that, 1 year is not really that long. So I guess he really did not find a fit in Japan.
I've known so many people from overseas who moved to Japan and hate Japan after, living here for months or sometimes years later. They usually come here because they loved video games, Japanese culture.
I think that happens to a lot of people. They get really homesick. For a lot of people that come to Japan, I think it's their first time coming to a foreign country, and a lot of people do miss their families and want to go home. It also happens to Japanese people when they go to the States or they go to another country. You're pretty far away from your family and you can't see them when you want to, and so it's pretty bad. I have that sometimes too, but I'm kind of used to that, so it doesn't really bother me anymore.
There are many reasons why it happens. Maybe some of you have heard of cultural iceberg. If you imagine the culture of one country to be an iceberg floating in the ocean, the part of the iceberg you can see is usually the material aspect of the country's culture. So for Japan, this would be video games, Japanese food, cosplay, statues of Colonel Sanders in samurai armor, obvious Japanese stuff. But what you don't see is the rest of the iceberg. And this is where the non-material parts of the culture are. This can be things like ideas on work ethic, views on raising children, how society views discriminated people.
Is erogacha a thing? It wouldn't surprise me if I saw that it is a real thing, but I didn't know that there was erogacha. I guess maybe there is in certain places. That's kind of strange for me.
Now, when I moved to Japan, I was placed in this really nice little countryside town where I quickly made friends and became a part of the local community.
I'm gonna stop him right there. So he said that he first started off in the countryside, which is rural Japan. I think just by going off of that alone, he's gonna say he's very lonely. It happens often a lot with foreigners when they first move to Japan. They get really lonely when they move to the rural areas because there's not that other kind of network for them to speak or make new friends very easily. I guess it's kind of common for some foreigners, if they're English teachers, to get stationed somewhere outside of Tokyo or outside of a busy city. And yeah, they do feel really lonely. I have a lot of friends that felt really lonely when they're working really far away from the central city or far away from lots of people, because there's not so much to do over there. And there's only so much you can see and so many people you can meet, and so yeah, it does get kind of boring or lonely, I guess, too.
I fell in love with every aspect of that town and the people around me. Heck, I even loved my job as an English teacher there. I found so much joy and happiness there that by the ripe old age of 28, I was considering my retirement there. I decided to leave that small town that I love so much to the big city of Osaka. There were a lot of factors that made daily living just incredibly difficult. The first was dealing with an actual Japanese-style commute. Now, in my old town, I lived about a 5-minute bike ride away from school, so I never had to get on a train or a bus. But here in Osaka, I had to get on some of the most crowded trains and subways. Not only that, but my school was 2.5 hours away. So I was up at 5:30 to get to school by 8, and it was a nightmare.
2.5 hours is very far. I can't imagine traveling that much daily to somewhere. That is crazy.
After, job dissatisfaction is one of the biggest reasons why you will hate Japan, and it's one that I've heard from my fellow expats over the years. You'll most likely find yourself working as an English teacher at some point in your life in Japan.
I've never been a full-time English teacher. I've only done a part-time and give private lessons, but I could definitely tell really fast that teaching English in Japan is not very satisfying kind of life. There's no upward movement in your career. The salary isn't really good, and I don't think they treat I don't think the companies treat the English teachers with very much respect and kind of like humans, because they can replace them so easily because so many people are looking for jobs in Japan. But I did have a few kind of jobs before where I didn't really like it, and I did really consider leaving Japan just because of the working style and the working culture I couldn't agree with very much. I think that's also why a lot of people say that Japan is very nice to visit as a tourist but not actually live here. It's probably because of the working style.
And I haven't even mentioned that it's pretty common for Japanese women to quit their jobs after the child is born. So if you are a man and you are only earning 25K from your teaching job, you're gonna have to pick up a lot of part-time jobs in addition to your full-time job just to make ends meet.
I don't know if I really agree with that. I noticed that there is a lot more Japanese women that would not like to quit their jobs, and they would like to continue their jobs even if they are mothers or married. And I think it's just kind of a more old way of thinking. Of course, there is still lots of people that do think that they should quit their job as soon as they get married or have children. But I think there's a lot less of those people thinking like that, or a lot less of those Japanese women thinking that way. And I think Japanese men as well.
I'm talking about people that you can really trust. Friends that not only share the same interests and culture as you, but friends who you can really open yourself up to. But even if you are able to establish those kinds of friendships, not a lot of them have plans to live there for as long as you may plan to.
I think my situation also is a little bit different. As I went to university here, I made friends with a lot more Japanese people compared to foreigners. And so any foreign friends that I made in university have already left by now. It is pretty hard to develop a relationship with them if you think they're just going to leave. I think it's also important to make more Japanese friends as well, to kind of, or at least the locals, so that you can kind of help assimilate in the culture a little bit more and make your stay a little bit easier.
This is when you really start to hit the lows of culture shock. And this is a bad place to be in because you just become so bitter and angry and blaming Japan and the country when in many cases the country and the culture of Japan have nothing to do with whatever you're angry at.
I think it also has a lot to do with your friend group and your friend circle. So if the people you hang out with a lot are very negative and they complain a lot, but of course this is just my opinion. I generally try to be very positive, and I try to surround myself around positive people.
Or maybe even getting your language skills up to a point where you can comfortably say things that you want to say.
You should definitely learn Japanese if you're in Japan.
Around you, and instead learning how to control yourself into better fitting into how Japanese society works. Of course, there are still going to be things that will bother you from time to time, but you're going to be in a much better mental space to deal with those problems.
Yeah, it's really important not to fight, Japanese culture and the way how Japanese people do things, because you're not going to win. You're just going to really frustrate yourself and make your life a lot more difficult.
Have a stash of your favorite foods in the closet for emergency situations whenever you're really missing home.
That's true. It's really important to have your favorite foods. I was really homesick because I was really missing foods back at home in Chicago. And that's one of the reasons why I learned how to cook, and I cook more often, because I can cook the very things that I really crave back in the States, because it's not as easily accessible, or it's just not the right taste in Japan. So for me, it's helped a lot by being able to cook the foods that I really miss.
There's something magical about it. It just makes you feel so much better, and it just relieves just a ton of stress.
Exactly same thing happened when I was living in New Zealand. It was a long time ago, and then there were no Japanese grocery store. But when I was living there, I missed Japanese snacks so much.
So yeah, that was the video of Why You Hate Living in Japan. I agree with a lot of those points actually, and I thought it was very helpful at the end of the things that you should do to kind of help make your stay a lot more enjoyable and to adjust a lot easier. It's kind of things that I mentioned before in the video. Well, anyway, thanks guys for watching. Give the like if you like this video. If there's anything you agreed with or didn't agree with, let me know in the comments below. A lot of these thoughts were my own and just kind of based off of my experiences too. And until next time guys, thanks for watching.